The radiator hissed and groaned in my East York semi-detached. A tired sound I had come to accept every winter. Outside, flakes of snow clung stubbornly to the window screen, and the streetlight painted the sidewalk in a faint orange glow. Toronto was in one of those cold snaps the weather station kept warning about. The kind where even the TTC buses wheezed slower than usual. I pulled the collar of my cardigan tighter as Jade sat across from me at the kitchen table. Laptop open, her fingertips trembling slightly above the trackpad. The faint smell of burnt toast still lingered from the breakfast I had forgotten in the toaster oven. But neither of us mentioned it. Can you read this part? The English it's too technical, Jade said softly, sliding the screen toward me. Her eyes avoided mine, fixed instead on the little spinning circle that meant the hospital portal was still loading. On the screen, her name glowed at the top, along with the words prenatal record update. Beneath it, a small red warning icon blinked. Blood type mismatch, review required. I adjusted my reading glasses and scanned the entry. My heart beat a little faster, but I kept my voice even. It says here the gestational age is 31 weeks, but last month it already said 28. I tapped the date with my finger. Do you see? The timing doesn't line up. Jade gave a quick, almost rehearsed laugh. Maybe the system glitched. They always make mistakes, don't they? She closed the laptop faster than I expected. I wanted to ask more. Instead, I sipped my lukewarm tea, letting the bitterness of oversteeped leaves settle on my tongue. At that moment, Daniel's text buzzed my phone, snowed in on the PAPE route. Overtime shift. Don't wait for me. I didn't reply. My son's job had swallowed another evening, leaving Jade here with me, in this too quiet kitchen. From the living room, the muffled sound of hockey night in Canada drifted through the wall, neighbors' TV. I imagined families huddled together, cheering goals, while here, silence sat heavy between us. Jade shifted in her chair, her toque still on though the house was warm. I'll make tea next time. You don't need to worry. Her words were kind, but her shoulders stiffened. The subtext was louder than the sentence, don't ask me questions. I let the moment pass. Instead, I opened the small notebook where I tracked hydro bills, rent payments from the basement tenants, and grocery costs. Numbers didn't lie the way people could. As the snow thickened outside, I wrote the date carefully, January 17th. A day I knew, without knowing why yet, I would remember. Jade, I said quietly, sometimes systems don't glitch. Sometimes they reveal what we don't want to see. She froze, then smiled faintly, though her eyes stayed on the floor. You always think too much. C'est la vie. The kettle clicked off behind us, steam curling upward like a ghost. I didn't answer. Instead, I folded my hands and listened to the distant wail of a GO train horn cutting through the snowstorm night. Carrying a truth I wasn't ready to say out loud. But I felt it. Something was coming. The next morning, I found the hydro bill wedged halfway through the mail slot. Damp from melting snow. I shook off the envelope and slid it open with the butter knife that was still sitting on the counter from last night's late sandwich. Numbers. Cold. Undeniable. $482.37. Nearly $100 more than last January, even though I had kept the thermostat at a stingy 19 degrees Celsius. The house felt colder just looking at the total. I set the envelope on the kitchen table where the sunlight filtered through frosted glass, turning every dust mote into a bright spark. Jade padded in, hair tied loosely, clutching her phone. Morning, she mumbled, pouring orange juice without meeting my eyes. I pushed the bill toward her. Look. She skimmed it quickly, shrugged. Everything's expensive these days. Inflation. It'll go down when spring comes. She drank the juice in one gulp, like she wanted the conversation finished. But I wasn't ready to let it pass. We'll have to cut some things. Less takeout. Maybe wait on the new baby furniture until after tax refund season. The glass in her hand tightened. A faint squeak against her palm. We already agreed on the stroller. It's important. Safety. Comfort. Don't you think the baby deserves that? Her tone was calm, but underneath, I heard something else. Don't interfere with my choices. I kept my voice even. The baby deserves a stable home. Jade. That means bills paid first. Silence stretched. From outside came the scrape of a neighbor's shovel against ice. Rhythmic. Insistent. She set the glass down carefully, as though it might shatter. I'll talk to Dan about it. As if the conversation wasn't between the two of us at all. That evening, Daniel finally trudged through the door. Shoulders dusted with salt from TTC bus seats. His toque damp from hours of snow. He smelled of diesel and cold metal. Long shift again. He sighed, untying his boots. Route 72 detour through Queen. Chaos. Half the passengers yelling, half asleep. I wanted to tell him about the hydro bill. But before I could, the front door opened again with a gust of icy air. Guess who brought reinforcements? Gavin's booming voice filled the narrow hall. He stomped in, shaking snow from his coat, holding a large cardboard box like a trophy. Jade lit up in a way she hadn't when Daniel entered. Oh wow, is that? He plunked the box down and peeled back the lid. A stroller, gleaming, wheels still wrapped in plastic. The tag dangled, $1.299.99. Top of the line, Gavin announced. Shock absorption, swivel handles, cup holders for days. My little grandkid deserves the best ride in town. Eh? Daniel gave a tired smile. Half genuine, half strained. That's a lot. Dad, you didn't need to. Family looks out for family. Gavin cut in smoothly, his eyes sliding toward Jade. Can't put a price on safety. The words hung in the air heavier than the winter coats dripping by the door. Later, after the stroller was tucked into the corner like an uninvited guest, I walked Gavin to the door. You shouldn't spend that kind of money, I said quietly, careful not to sound accusing. He flashed a grin. Relax. I've got it covered. Besides, Jade shouldn't have to worry about bills in her condition. You know how it is. What he didn't say, Dan works too much. You can't provide. I can. I tightened my scarf, even though the hallway was warm. We'll manage. He gave a little shrug. That same shrug he used 20 years ago when he borrowed tools he never returned. C'est la vie, And with that, he was gone into the swirling snow. When I returned to the kitchen, Jade was still there, scrolling on her phone. She didn't look up. The hydro bill was still lying on the table, numbers glaring under the ceiling light. Next to it sat the stroller receipt Gavin had left behind. Crumpled but legible. Almost the same total. I ran my finger over the numbers. 2 bills. 2 choices. 2 versions of family responsibility. One unavoidable. One showy. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, rattling the glass. Inside, the silence rattled louder. The weekend thawed slightly, though the sidewalks were still a patchwork of slush and salt. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, shoulders rounded, rubbing his temples with one hand. The smell of road grit and diesel clung to his uniform even after he'd showered. Another detour today? I asked gently, setting down a plate of leftover banh chung from last night's potluck. The sticky rice smelled faintly of pandan and pork, comfort layered in starch. He gave a tired laugh. When isn't there a detour? Construction on Queen again. We had to reroute past St. Mike's. Whole bus of people groaning like it was the end of the world. His laugh faded. He pushed a stack of papers toward me, shift logs. Neat columns stamped with times, routes, and operator ID. Look at this, he said. His finger traced a line of numbers. January 10th. My shift was 2 p.m. to midnight. Non-stop. I didn't even get a proper meal break. I scanned the paper, not sure where he was going. He exhaled, voice lower. That was the same day Jade said she had a prenatal education class at women's college. She told me it went till 9. But, he tapped the log again. I drove past there at 8:45. Saw the lights off. Parking lot empty. My throat tightened. Maybe they finished early. He shook his head slowly. She texted me at 9:30. Said she was still there. The air between us shifted, heavier. Like a snow-laden roof groaning under weight. Later that evening, Jade breezed in, cheeks flushed from the cold. Toque pulled low. She set a small shopping bag on the counter with a forced brightness. Picked up some herbal tea. Good for sleep. We could both use that. Right? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He just slid the shift sheet closer to her side of the table. Jade, can you explain this? Her smile faltered. Explain what? The class. You said you were there till 9:30. His voice wasn't angry, just tired, edged with something like pleading. But I drove past. The building was dark. A silence stretched. I heard the hum of the fridge, the faint rattle of the furnace. Jade opened the shopping bag, pulled out the tea, and busied herself tearing at the cardboard box. Maybe you misread. Maybe they used a side door. These hospitals are confusing. The explanation was too quick. Her hands trembled slightly as she peeled back the wrapper. I didn't want to speak, but something inside me pushed. I checked your hospital portal. Jade, the times don't match. And the notes? I chose my words carefully. They weren't written by your doctor. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. Why are you looking at my records? Because you asked me to read them. I reminded her softly. You said the English was too technical. She blinked once, then looked away. Her silence said more than words. The following afternoon, while Jade rested upstairs, I went to clear the recycling bin in the porch. A folded paper slipped from the side of the bag, a printout from the hospital portal. At the bottom was a faint logo. Not of the hospital but of a contracting company. Sinclair Renovations. Gavin's old business. Half defunct, but still stamped on pens. Invoices. Even stray PDFs. I felt my stomach twist. The same logo I had seen on the contractor's pen Jade used at the clinic sign in kiosk. It wasn't proof, but it was pattern. That night, Daniel sat hunched over his phone at the kitchen table. I joined him, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He scrolled through operator updates. Messages from his union. The system tracks everything. Entry logs, fare box counts, GPS timestamps. If I request the data, I could prove exactly where I was on those nights. No way I could be the father if... His voice caught. He didn't finish the sentence. I placed my hand over his. His skin was cold, fingers restless. Daniel, I said softly, sometimes the truth is heavier than a snowstorm. But storms pass. They always do. He nodded, though his eyes brimmed with something he didn't let fall. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Jade's footsteps, pausing outside the kitchen door. She didn't come in. Instead, we heard the front porch light click off. Then the quiet slam of the screen door. Through the frosted window, I caught a shadow slipping into a pickup truck idling at the curb. Gavin's truck. The headlights stayed dark as it pulled away into the night. Snow crusted the window ledge, glittering under the weak afternoon sun. I sat with Madame Lavoie at her kitchen table. A faint smell of maple cookies and lavender soap filling the air. She shuffled through a folder of documents. The kind she always kept too neatly labeled. You asked me about Sinclair, she said, her accent wrapping each word. I found something, not in the hydro files, not in the tax records, but in the community center newsletters. Look. She slid a photocopied page toward me. At the top, Community Youth Renovation Program, Summer 2011. Below, a grainy photo. Fresh paint on a cinderblock wall. Teenagers in safety vests. And standing behind them, clipboard in hand, smiling broadly, Gavin Sinclair. But my eyes caught someone else. In the corner, slim shoulders, arms crossed, gaze wary. Jade, 17, maybe 18. I touched the page as if the paper itself held warmth. She was in foster care then. Madame murmured, stirring her tea. Moved around. They put the kids to work in programs like this. To keep them busy. Sinclair was supervisor. The words hummed like static in my ears. It wasn't just about a stroller or a hydro bill anymore. This thread went back years. That evening, I found Jade sitting in the living room. A blanket pulled to her chin. The TV played softly. Muted commercials for a dépanneur chain in Montreal, cheerful jingles out of place in our heavy air. I sat down slowly, leaving space between us. Jade, I said gently, I saw the newsletter. From the renovation program. Her eyes flickered, then lowered. She gripped the blanket tighter. You went digging? I wanted to understand. I replied, keeping my voice even. She laughed softly, but it wasn't joy, more like surrender. I was 17, group home in Scarborough. They dropped me off at this community thing. Said it would teach me skills. I just learned how heavy drywall is. Her words were sharp, but her voice cracked on the last syllable. And Gavin? I asked. The silence that followed was louder than any accusation. Flashback. The smell of sawdust, fresh and sharp. A fan buzzing in the corner of the gym they'd converted into a workshop. Hold it steady, Jade, Gavin's voice, too close, guiding her hand on the drill. His smile wide, his tone fatherly in public, but quieter when no one listened. You're good at this, he murmured, better than the boys. You've just never had someone believe in you. She had rolled her eyes. But inside, part of her wanted to believe. Wanted any adult to see her as more than a file folder. After the session, he offered her a ride back. Said the bus was too long. Too dangerous after dark. She hesitated. He waited, patient, leaning on the truck hood until she nodded. That was how it started, not with grand gestures, but with small rescues that built a chain of debt. Back in the present, Jade's eyes glistened, though no tears fell. He paid for my winter boots once. Nothing fancy, just Canadian Tire, but it was the first time anyone bought me something because they wanted to. Not because the foster agency reimbursed them. I stayed quiet. The kettle clicked off in the kitchen, steam hissing like a warning. He used to say, "You'll understand one day, kiddo. Some people are meant to take care of each other." And I believed him. Her hands twisted the blanket, knuckles white. When Dan proposed, I thought, maybe I was free. But Gavin never really left. He always had some reason to call, some excuse to show up. Her voice dropped, and I didn't know how to say no. The room was still, only the faint tick of the clock over the mantel counted time. I reached out, placed my hand gently over hers. Her skin was ice cold. Trembling. You don't owe him your life. I whispered, kindness isn't ownership. Debt doesn't make family. She shook her head quickly. But he helped me, more than anyone else ever did. Sometimes I think, maybe I mistook gratitude for something else. Her words floated, unfinished, as though naming it would shatter what little protection denial had given her. From outside came the low rumble of a truck engine idling again. My stomach turned. Through the curtain's thin fabric. Headlights glowed briefly, then clicked off. Jade flinched, eyes darting to the window. She didn't need to say a word. I knew. The potluck began with the smell of butter tarts and fish sauce. Winter coats creaking as neighbors shrugged them off. Cheeks pink from the wind. Snow clung to boots in melting clumps by the door, leaving little ponds that turned the entryway into a sloppy rink. I spread old towels on the floor, my grandmother's trick, and switched the hallway light to its warmer bulb. Everything looks kinder under soft light. In the kitchen, steam rose from a tureen of foie gras. Cilantro snapped under my fingers. I arranged tortillere slices on a platter Madame Lavoie had labeled in careful block letters. No pork, Dinda Salaman. Jade stood at the counter slicing oranges, the knife tapping the cutting board with tidy regularity. Her face had that tired, careful brightness she wore in public. Dan set out mismatched mugs. He'd found an extra stack in the basement suite and washed them one by one. Sleeves damp. The smell of dish soap on his hands. Smells like a dépanneur and a Tet kitchen had a baby. Someone joked as the living room filled. Laughter bubbled, grateful and busy. Hockey night murmured from my neighbor's TV next door, the cadence of commentators threading through the wall like a familiar lullaby, on the power play. I watched Jade. Her shoulders were square, chin high, eyes avoiding the window. She'd chosen a soft wool sweater that made her look younger. Or maybe just more breakable. Say beau, ka, Madame said, hovering beside me with a ledger tucked under her arm. She always brought a ledger. Even to parties. We should start with grace, gratitude for warm food and warm houses. For warm houses, I echoed, glancing at the hydro bill peeking from my notebook on the side table. I slipped the notebook closed. We held hands in a circle that formed and reformed awkwardly around toddlers and a sleeping baby. Palms damp. Fingers cold. When we let go, the room hummed, louder and looser. Plates clinked. Someone asked for soy sauce. Someone else asked if the ginger cookies were gluten-free. Normal. I breathed in the normal. Put it in my pocket. Kept it as long as I could. Jade, I said, not loudly, would you mind helping me with the labels? Just to make sure the allergies are all right. She nodded, relieved to have a task. Of course. We bent over the index cards together. Contains eggs, dairy-free, peanuts. The felt tip squeaked faintly. Her handwriting tilted left, mine right. Our heads almost touched. To anyone else, we looked like a mother and daughter sorting appetizers. Quietly, I said, at the clinic, when you sign anything, do you feel clear about what you're consenting to? She didn't look up. Yes, she said, too quickly, most of the time. What about guardianship papers? I kept my tone the way I chop onions, steady. Eyes open. Emergency contacts. Access to records. The knife paused. A slice of orange sagged from the blade. Juice spotting the cutting board like sun on snow. I put Dan, she said. A good answer. The right answer. Her voice, though, had a tremor in it. And, sometimes Gavin. In case Dan's driving. I placed a label down. Smoothing the edge with my thumb. Sometimes is a lot of room. Jade swallowed. It's just practical. From the living room, a cheer rose. Someone's toddler had identified a maple leaf flag on a cup. The child waved it, delighted. Canada, she announced to no one in particular. I turned to Jade. Practical is good, but practical can become a habit. Habits can become rights. If no one says, stop. Her eyes flicked to the door as it opened again. Cold air swirled, a familiar cologne riding the draft like a calling card. Gavin arrived with a grin wide enough to be mistaken for generosity. He shook hands, kissed cheeks, told a baby he'd buy him skates by spring. Habs or Leafs, he laughed. And the room laughed back. He placed a box on the table, baklava from a high-end shop downtown. Pistachios crowning each diamond like tiny green crowns. The receipt, glossy and proud, peeked from the bag. Thought I'd sweeten the evening, he said, planting himself near Jade. How's our mama? Our mama, as if the words weren't a claim. Hungry, Jade replied, forcing lightness. She reached for a plate, but missed the stack, hand hovering a moment in the air. I passed her one. She didn't meet my eyes. Madame Lavoie materialized at my elbow. Ledger under arm. I've been thinking. She said, conversational, like we were discussing butter pricing at Metro. You know liens? The way you can secure a debt to a physical thing. Like a vehicle? She said it to me, but pitched her voice for the room. A teacher setting terms no one had asked for. Very useful when people mix gifts with obligations. Lien? Someone repeated. Like, you can take their car? Non. Madam corrected gently. You don't take, you secure. If they promised to repay and didn't, you make the promise visible. Gavin chuckled. We're talking vehicles now? At a potluck? What's next? Property tax? Property tax is a winter sport. Madam shot back. The room laughed, but I saw Gavin's jaw tighten for a second. A pulse jumping near his ear. Dan drifted from guest to guest. A man in perpetual motion. He smiled, refilled water jugs, dabbed a spill. He was good at the public parts of love. The private parts he carried like a bruise under his sweater. I moved to the sideboard to stack plates. There it was, tucked under the baklava box. Almost shy about being seen, a stroller invoice. Folded and refolded. I didn't mean to look. But paper talks when you've spent a life reading bills and deeds. Reconciling numbers until your eyes sting. I slid it out gently, as if it might yelp. Same model, same price. The billing address, our house. The shipping address, Gavin's condo. 2 invoices for the same luxury stroller. 1, gift. Twice paid? A cold ripple ran along my scalp, like the shock of stepping in slush with a hole in your boot. I folded the paper back along its tired crease and slipped it into my notebook. Between the hydro bill and a grocery list for next week. The ink looked obscene. Gifts, like debts, can be duplicated. Dan, I said softly, catching his sleeve as he passed. When you have a minute, look at this. Not now, his eyes said, with a plea. Not in front of everyone. But I saw in the set of his mouth that he would look. Later. Gavin clapped, bright as a host. Speech. Our matriarch should say a word. I didn't want to be a stage. But the room turned toward me. Warm, expectant. I held the ladle like a microphone. Its metal warm from broth. Thank you for feeding each other. I began. January is long. Nights are longer. Food makes it bearable. I looked at the faces. The Syrian couple who always bring the best pickles. The student from Côte des Neiges whose winter coat is too thin. 2 aunties with eyebrows threaded to perfection and eyes that missed nothing. We look after one another here. We do it with boundaries. The word settled. Boundaries. It sounded like a fence. But I meant a door. Something that opens and also closes. I set the ladle down. In this house, I said, feeling my voice steady, we write down who has access to our records. We track who holds keys. We keep receipts. We don't confuse gifts with claims. Jade's face tilted toward me, her mouth parted. The smallest shake of the head, not now. Please. The room faded to a hush that wasn't silence. Exactly, more like the pause in snowfall when the air decides which way to turn. I softened. And when something feels too heavy to carry alone, we ask for help that doesn't cost our dignity. Madam made a small approving sound. Almost a hum. Voila. Gavin laughed. A hair too loud. Bit formal for meat pies and spring rolls. No? Come on. Lighten up. We're family. Family is a verb, I said. It's something you do, or don't. He smiled without his eyes. I've been doing my part. I looked at the baklava. The stroller's ghost in the corner. The second invoice in my notebook. You've been doing something. Dan stepped between us, not confrontational, but present. We're setting up a meeting, he said, voice level, with a family lawyer, to make sure everything's clear before the baby comes. Guardianship, emergency contacts, record access, support, no pressure, just clarity. The room shifted again, people finding coats. Suddenly remembering babysitters and bedtimes. Winter nights end like that in Toronto, abruptly and with apologies. Text me, someone said. Drive safe. Boots squeaked. The outside door yawned open. Breathed cold into the hallway. Gavin's smile thinned. A lawyer? Over what, exactly? His gaze slid to Jade. I thought we were aligned. The word fell like a metal spoon on tile. Jade didn't answer. She held her plate steady with two hands, as if it might tip. I kept my voice small. Over clarity, I said, so we don't mistake old patterns for new rights. He looked at me like he wanted to say something cruel, and thought better of it. You do what you need to. He finally said, I'll be there. Good. Dan replied, we'll send the time. As the crowd thinned, I walked into the quiet of the kitchen. The kind of quiet that lives under the hum of the fridge and the tick of the thermostat. I opened my notebook to slide in a recipe card and saw it again, the twin stroller invoices. Side by side with the hydro bill. Like a math problem that solved itself into truth. Jade appeared in the doorway. Cheeks drained of color. Plate untouched. She said, barely a voice. If I say no, if I say, please stop showing up, what happens then? You've already said it, I replied. Now we help you keep it said. Her eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back. She set the plate down. Half a slice of tortillere trembling on porcelain. Okay, she whispered. Okay. From the front hall came the scrape of boots and the low rumble of a truck engine warming. Through the frosted glass, I saw a figure linger at the curb longer than polite. Headlights off. I reached for the chain on the door and slid it across with a soft metal click that sounded, to me, like a sentence finishing. The community legal clinic sat between a payday loan storefront and a shuttered travel agency. Its sign half buried in snow. Inside, the heat blasted too high, making the air dry and metallic. Salt stains marked every corner of the floor tiles, like ghosts of January boots. Daniel shifted in his chair. Jacket folded neatly across his lap. Fingers tapping a rhythm he probably didn't even hear. Jade sat beside him, her toque still on, eyes fixed on the posters taped to the wall. Tenant rights. Family law. Know your boundaries. I kept my notebook closed, hands resting on it as if the paper inside were alive. A young lawyer, barely older than Daniel, sat across the desk. Her name tag read S-Core, and her smile was gentle but firm. She spoke in the careful cadence of someone used to explaining hard truths without breaking them. So, she began, flipping open a thin folder. You've brought hydro statements, TTC shift logs, hospital portal printouts, and 2 invoices for the same stroller. Her voice didn't rise, didn't judge. She simply arranged the papers side by side, neat as laundry folded in a drawer. Tell me what you need from this meeting. I drew a breath. Clarity, protection, boundaries. Daniel nodded, his jaw tight. Jade didn't move. Ms. Kaur adjusted her glasses. Let's separate issues. First, guardianship and emergency contacts. Right now, who has access to the hospital records? Dan, Jade said quickly, then quieter, and, sometimes Gavin. If Dan's on shift. The lawyer tapped her pen. That's discretionary. You can revoke it anytime. You're not obligated to give access to anyone except who you trust. Jade's fingers twisted in her lap. If I revoke it, he'll show up. He always shows up. The words cracked open like ice on the Don River, revealing something dark underneath. Ms. Kaur leaned forward, voice steady. That's where a no-contact order comes in. You don't have to carry this alone. Daniel finally spoke, his voice low but shaking with something close to anger. He's been circling the house, parking out front, idling the truck like he's waiting for an invitation. It's harassment. The lawyer nodded, scribbling. Document every instance. Dates, times, witnesses, even a neighbor's photo can help. The more consistent the log, the stronger your case. Her words were calm, clinical, but I saw Jade's shoulders stiffen, her breath catch. Documentation wasn't just ink, it was exposure. I placed my hand on hers. Light but firm. Jade, paper is not rage. It doesn't scream. It just sits and proves. Her lips trembled, then curved into the smallest nod. The lawyer turned a page. Second, finances. The duplicate invoices suggest confusion. At best, if money was exchanged under pressure, we can pursue repayment. One option. File a mechanic's lien against an asset in his name. Vehicle, property, equipment. It sends a message. Generosity isn't leverage. Daniel let out a breath. Almost a laugh without humor. His truck. He babies that thing. Then it's leverage back. Ms. Kaur replied simply. The image flickered in my mind, Gavin's pickup idling under the street lamp. Headlights dark. Paper might reach where anger couldn't. Silence settled. The fluorescent light above us buzzed faintly. A sound like bees trapped in glass. Jade finally whispered, if the baby isn't Dan's, if the test shows that, do I still have a place here? The question landed heavier than any invoice. Heavier than the hydro bill. Heavier than 40 winters of sacrifice. Daniel's hand twitched toward hers, then pulled back, fingers curling into his palm. His face was pale, eyes glassy with conflict. I answered for both of us. Place isn't erased by blood. But boundaries will be. No more hidden doors. No more borrowed names. Her eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. She nodded once, sharp and certain, as though agreeing to her own verdict. The meeting ended with a packet of papers slid across the desk, consent forms. Restraining orders. Paternity options. The words were cold, bureaucratic, but they were also a ladder out of a hole. When we stepped outside, the cold slapped my face. Crisp and almost clean. Traffic hissed along the slush on Dundas. The streetcar bell clanged in the distance. Jade pulled her scarf higher, hiding half her face. Daniel walked ahead, boots crunching, shoulders hunched against wind and worry. I fell into step beside Jade. You asked. I reminded her, voice low. If you say no, what happens? This is what happens. We build paper strong enough to hold it. She didn't answer, but her arm brushed mine, close enough to say thank you without sound. The envelope arrived in a plain white sleeve, thin as if it carried nothing at all. Daniel held it like it might burn through his palm. We sat in the kitchen, radiator clanging, the faint smell of ginger tea steeping. Outside, freezing rain tapped against the window. Tiny needles of sound. Jade sat opposite him, scarf still on, even indoors, her eyes fixed on the steam curling from her mug. She hadn't touched it. Daniel inhaled sharply, then tore the flap. One page, a line of numbers, ratios, and one sentence bolded. Probability of paternity, 0.0%. The silence stretched, brittle and endless. Jade's lips parted. She whispered, almost inaudible, I'm sorry. Daniel didn't answer right away. His knuckles whitened as he folded the page, then unfolded it, as though he wanted to change the words by creasing them differently. Finally, he stood, not storming, not shouting, just rising with the slow inevitability of a tide. I'll move downstairs, he said, voice low, until we figure boundaries. The word landed heavy, but fair. Jade flinched, eyes wet, but nodded. She didn't plead, Perhaps she knew pleading was another debt. And the room already overflowed with debts. That night, I found Daniel in the basement suite, unpacking a blanket into the small fold-out bed. The air smelled of concrete and detergent. "You're not abandoning her," I said softly. He shook his head. "No, but I can't share a bed with a lie." His eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "I'll still help, just from a step away." I laid a hand on his shoulder. It was trembling, but steady enough to keep going. Days later, at the legal clinic, Ms. Kaur slid another paper toward me, a form authorizing a no-contact order. "We can file this if Gavin continues to appear," she said. "You already have your log. His voicemail strengthens the case." I nodded. Beside it, another form. Lien claim, personal vehicle. I pictured the truck, idling at the curb, headlights off. For months, it had been a shadow outside my house. Now it could be collateral. A thing bound to paper. "File it," I said. Paper, not rage. 2 nights later, the phone rang at 10:42. The old landline crackled, voice heavy with false calm. "You can't erase history, Gavin said. "That baby's mine. You'll never cut me out." His breath lingered in the static. "Paper burns." I didn't answer. I only wrote the date and words into my logbook. Then I set the phone back on its cradle. The click louder than his threat. The next morning, Jade lingered in the doorway. Hair unbrushed, eyes swollen from a sleepless night. "If he's banned, if you take his truck, does that make me complicit?" she asked. Voice thin. I turned from the stove. Where oatmeal bubbled. "You're complicit only if you keep the door open. Say no, Jade. We'll help you keep it said." She pressed her hands flat against the doorframe, as if steadying herself. "Then, file it, please." It wasn't loud, but it was her first real no. Weeks passed. The papers moved through channels slowly, like ice shifting on the Don River. The lien was stamped, the order signed. Gavin showed up once more, banging on the porch rail. Voice muffled but angry. "You can't freeze me out of my own blood." I didn't open the door. I only lifted my phone. Camera steady. Evidence, not reaction. Minutes later, his truck peeled away, leaving tire ruts in the slush. Another line in the logbook. Daniel returned upstairs one evening to repair a leaky tap. His face looked older, jaw harder. When he finished, he paused at the door. Hand on the frame. "Mom," he said softly, "I keep wondering, was I too blind? Too trusting?" I shook my head. "Trust isn't blindness. It's the proof you gave love. If someone turns it into a weapon, that's their guilt, not yours." He exhaled, shoulders easing, as if those words carried weight he hadn't been able to put down. That night, I dreamed of the truck again. Headlights dark, engine idling, only this time, the hood was chained to a post. Lien papers fluttering like flags in the wind. When I woke, the house was quiet. No truck outside, no footsteps in the snow. Just peace, fragile, but mine. By March, the snowbanks along Pape Avenue had shrunk to gray ridges, streaked with grit and candy wrappers. Water ran in rivulets toward storm drains, gurgling like secrets finally released. For the first time in months, I cracked a window while making tea. The air carried a hint of mud, damp and raw, but it was alive. Jade sat at the table, flipping through a packet from the legal clinic. The cover read, "Co-parenting guidelines. Access orders, support agreements." Her hands trembled slightly, but her shoulders sat higher than before. "I didn't think I'd get this far," she murmured. "When you spend years owing someone, you forget what free air smells like." I set a cup beside her. The steam curled upward, mixing with the early spring light. "It smells like choices," I said. She smiled faintly, the first smile that reached her eyes in weeks. Daniel had moved back upstairs gradually, first with a toolbox, then a spare shirt, finally his pillow. He still kept his shoes lined at the basement door, a symbol of distance he wasn't quite ready to erase. One evening, as he tightened a cabinet hinge, he said quietly, "I'll stay involved, but as an uncle, not as what I hoped." His voice cracked, but his hands were steady. Jade, standing nearby, nodded. "That's fair." Her words held no bitterness, only acknowledgement. It wasn't the ending he wanted, but it was a beginning with truth. And truth, though colder, is kinder. I spent the first warm Saturday in the garden. raking dead leaves to reveal small green shoots beneath. Madame Lavoie leaned over the fence, ledger still under her arm. "You see?" she said, eyes twinkling. "Snow hides everything, but it cannot stop the roots." I brushed soil from my gloves. "And the roots don't need permission to grow." "Exactmon." She grinned. The lean had gone through. Gavin's truck was impounded, chained behind a wire fence at the city yard. He called once more, voice ragged, promising he'd find another way. I saved the voicemail, forwarded it to Ms. Kaur, then pressed delete from my own phone. The space it left behind felt like a clean shelf. Rumor through neighbors was that he'd taken a job out of town, construction shifts in Hamilton. Maybe Windsor. No truck, no visits, just absence. Absence is not peace, but it's a start. By April, I had decided to convert the smaller basement suite into below-market rent for single mothers. A woman named Asha moved in, her toddler clutching a stuffed beaver missing one eye. When she thanked me, I only shook my head. We help each other. That's how the rent gets paid, respect. That line became my new rule, respect is rent. Not optional, not negotiable. One Sunday, I rode Daniel's bus route for the first time. The TTC engine hummed steady, the fare box dinged, and the city slid by, storefronts waking. Patios stacked with unused chairs. Teenagers carrying Timbits boxes to practices. I sat midway back, notebook in hand, and watched my son's reflection in the mirror above the driver's seat. He looked older, yes, but also steadier. Each stop he announced with clarity. Voice firm over the intercom, "Next stop. Mortimer. Next stop. O'Connor." Every word was proof. Boundaries held. That evening, we shared a simple family dinner, Jade, Daniel, and me. No feast, no spectacle, just macaroni with extra cheese. A green salad, a pot of tea. The hydro bill lay folded neatly at the corner of the table. Smaller than before, manageable. "Feels different," Daniel said, fork tapping lightly. "Because we're not pretending anymore," I replied. The room was quiet, but not heavy. It was the quiet of breathing after a storm. After dinner, I walked into the garden alone. The snow had vanished, leaving damp earth and the smell of thaw. I pressed my hands into the soil, feeling it give way under my palms. Soft and ready. For 40 winters, I had carried silence like armor. But this spring, I had rules, paper, and proof. More than that, I had my own name intact. I whispered to the evening air, to the robins singing somewhere unseen. Respect isn't a gift. Respect is rent. And I'm finally paid in full. Family can be both our shelter and our storm. This story reminds us that trust, once broken, does not have to destroy us. It can also teach us the power of boundaries. For many Canadians, the pressures of high housing costs, hydro bills, and long commutes already strain daily life. When betrayal or manipulation enters the home, it can feel unbearable. Yet what we've seen is that dignity is not lost in silence, it is preserved in action. Paperwork, small daily choices, and the courage to say no can be more powerful than rage. Spring always comes after winter, no matter how heavy the snow. In the same way, healing comes when we stop pretending and start building on truth. Respect, like rent, is not a gift, it is owed. And when we insist on it, whether from partners, family, or ourselves, we create space for peace, for honest connection, and for futures that are not weighed down by secrets. If you've ever faced something similar, a broken trust, a difficult decision, or a moment where you had to set boundaries, know that you are not alone. Sharing stories is how we remind each other that resilience is possible, even in the coldest seasons. Right finger share your story in the comments below. Your voice may be the spring thaw for someone else still buried in snow. Wishing you warmth, clarity, and peace in the days ahead. Tulip.